Hi and welcome back to the channel. So let's talk about Gonzalo Lira. It's been reported since 2 or 3 days back that he is in fact deceased in Ukraine. I mean, he's not among the living anymore. And let's talk a bit about that. To begin with, I want to say that I'm not happy about that. Even though I condemned his propagandism that he was doing ever since the start of the war in Ukraine. But anyway, there's a lot to talk about him. Because now he was rather famous, like in the internet sphere or in the so-called manosphere or manoswamp. He was famous. He had hundreds of thousands of subscribers on his various channels. And well, according to me, his most important channel and work was Coach Red Pill. And then I want to add the early videos of Coach Red Pill. We're talking like 2017 and early 2018. And I like the videos where he was non-political and also not misogynistic, like spewing all this hate about women. I liked his videos where he was talking like business and father-son relations and like personal stuff, like family stuff, business things. That's what I liked about him. And he, as I've said in another video, it wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. He's become like a phenomenon, and he was a phenomenon already before all this, even before the Ukrainian war. He'd become like a phenomenon on YouTube because of his strong charisma and the way he was filming his videos. Not so much what he was saying, it was the way he was saying it. And also, to a lesser extent, the way he was filming it. For example, there's a YouTuber called Rich Cooper, Entrepreneurs in Cars, and he weighed in on this, and he said that what was so special about Gonzalo Lira was, for example, his the way he was making his films, like his camera technique and his editing technique. Yeah, sure, but it wasn't that was the main point. The main point was how he was making in the films and how he was speaking and presenting himself in the videos. Anyway, enough about that. Now, like, the internet is blowing up and YouTube is blowing up and Twitter and whatnot, from all his supporters, like his post-mortem or whatever it's called, supporters, that he was a journalist and that he was murdered in Ukraine. And I'm here to tell you that he was not a journalist and he was not murdered. That's one of the things that I want to make clear in this video. There are other things as well. But this is just wrong. Gonzalo Lira was anything but a journalist. He was not a journalist. He was a YouTuber, successful YouTuber, before he smashed his own channel, you could say, by the things he did and said. He was a YouTuber. He was a pundit, like a political pundit. He, in his later videos, especially after the start of the war, he weighed in on the politics, on the geopolitics, and ultimately the Ukrainian-Russian geopolitics. It's like when the war in Ukraine started, everybody forgot Corona and they started to become experts on the war. Like, there's a meme on the internet, like, I'm not longer an expert on Corona and, epidemiology. I'm now an expert on geopolitics. That's true. Even me, of course. I also became an expert on geopolitics all of a sudden. Jokes aside. But, yeah. So he was a YouTuber and he was a pundit. A pundit is somebody who has a lot of opinions about stuff, especially in the political realm. And Gonzalo, yeah, he started pumping out his opinions about the Ukrainian war and what was going on there. And but he was anything but a journalist. He, on the eve of the war, like on the first days of the war, in February 2022, he was in this hotel in Kiev, Premier Palace. and he filmed videos there where he was like talking trash and whatnot, and walking around in a fucking bathtub pajamas or whatever it was, and he got thrown out of the hotel because, yeah. Anyway, doesn't matter. So he was in Kiev in the war, and he was walking around a little on the beginning, and he was walking around a little bit in Kiev in the streets, like filming a few buildings and a few people. He filmed like Western journalists that he was insulting for no good reason. He also did that in the hotel. He was talking trash about the journalists. And yeah, so I don't call that journalism what he did. That's not journalism. That's like, at best, it's like punditism, like filming himself talking about current events. And he was nowhere near the front or the battles or any military activity in Ukraine. So how can you call him a journalist? He was anything but a journalist. So just stop calling him a journalist. He wasn't a journalist by any measure of the concept. I mean, sitting in Kiev or in Kharkiv during the war, sitting in a hotel talking your own opinions and chatting with overseas YouTubers that like he did, or talking to YouTubers in Europe. I mean, overseas sounds like America for us Europeans, but I mean, if he talks to a YouTuber in Germany or UK or whatever, that's not, I mean, that's not overseas. But anyway, that doesn't make him a journalist. And of course, no serious news outlet would have anything to do with him because of his freaked out opinions, of course. And like, he was sitting in his balcony in Kharkiv. We can presume it was in Kharkiv because we have no proof that he in fact has an apartment in Kharkiv, that it was this town. I talked about this in another video. So anyway, but he was sitting in that apartment that got raided in the end, and he was talking and talking and talking, and like making these live streams, and what was it he called it? He talked to like 3-4 people on the screen, and that's not journalism. He was just a guy with a lot of opinions. And the fact that he was in Ukraine doesn't change that. He was still no journalist. So everybody can just shut up about Gonzalo Lira being a journalist, because he wasn't a journalist, for fucking crying out loud. So that's it. You can call him YouTuber, pundit, or entertainer. I would call him an entertainer and a storyteller. But in fact, I mean, his videos from the war on, when the war started and on, that wasn't very entertaining at all. And it wasn't storytelling either, except like talking trash and pushing Russian narrative, propaganda. So he was a storyteller back in his Coach Red Pill days. That was storytelling on a high level, actually. Because he was charismatic and he was captivating. His stories that he told was probably far from the truth or his own lived experiences, but they were still entertaining and food for thought, many of them. Especially the ones that were non-political and non-misogynistic. I still want to recommend a video he did that was talking about budgeting your life. He was like showing his computer screen with these different staples of different colors and different rows and columns, and that represented the different stages in your life. That was a great video. Not the only great one he did, but that one was great. He actually did 2 about how to budget your life. The one titled How to Budget Your Life, that's not the one I'm referring to, because that's the one where he went on the bus in London. But the other one is like the sequel to that one, when he was sitting by his computer and showing all these graphics and diagrams and stuff. That was a great video. I recommend you to see it, each and every one of you. I don't remember the name of the actual video, but you're gonna find it. And then he also made a video called When You Don't Respect Your Father, and that was very good, and it rang true with me because I have similar experiences of very distressed and very problematic relations with your father. But anyway, basically, Coach Red Pill or Gonzalo Lira, I think he like lost his mind and lost his wits. At latest at the start of the war. Like people call him grifter and that he like monkey branches from one source of income to another, and I don't doubt that. He probably made a hell of a lot of money on Patreon and YouTube and some other stuff as well. Some channels that I don't know about and I don't care either. And he also grifted and like cheated people of their money for this this novel called The Wheelchair Boulevard. Like, oh, pay me please so I can finish this novel, Wheelchair Boulevard. And he made so good theatrics. Like, he's like an actor. As I said in a previous video from October 2022, he could have been a big actor because he's so charismatic, he's convincing, and he has the acting skills and definitely the storytelling skills. So Gonzalo Lira could well have been a big actor, like a big name in Hollywood, for sure. Especially for like indie roles, like indie films, independent stuff, like probably some shit from, you know, this Quentin Tarantino or somebody like that, or, you know, because he was like a peculiar guy, Gonzalo Lira. And I want to stress now that we don't even know that he's dead. There is zero proof that he's dead, only rumors. And like what we all heard was that Tucker Carlson reported this and he referred to the US Department of State. But this is just second or third hand information. This is not first hand information. First hand information will come from the Ukrainian Armed Forces or the Ukrainian Department of State or whatever it's called, or the government of Ukraine, or the US equivalent, like the US Department of State or US Press Secretary or somebody like that. Because now Gonzalo is getting like he's becoming a high profile guy now after his assumed death. Now his fame is like blowing up even more now on the internet, on YouTube. Of course, only among people that are interested in him, either for him or against him, or taking an interest in him whatsoever. This is all in the internet, in the digital world. It's not in the meat world, as we say in Sweden, like the real world. Gonzalo Lira was a total nobody, like most influencers are in the real world. But on the internet, he was big. Like, yeah, whatever. So yeah. As I said, we don't know for a fact that he's dead, but actually I do think this is the case now. But we have to wait for official confirmation from US Department of State or whatever. Some official entity. Because we can't just take some third or fourth hand information on internet from Tucker Carlson for a fact. Anyway, so let's presume he's in fact not among the living anymore. His health was, they say his health was bad, and he said it too. And he claimed he had some very serious health issue even before the war. I remember that well. Like he said, oh, I'm gonna make these videos so my kids will see them because I have a condition. He didn't say which one. And it's likely that I won't be around for much longer. That's what he said. Even long before the war, when he was sitting in this carpenter studio he had. It was like carpenting stuff, pictures of his kids and his filmmaking, his cameras basically. So he might have had lung cancer, he might have had any serious disease, or this, because he was a heavy smoker. Even though he didn't smoke in those early videos, he only started smoking on camera after the start of the war. I can't blame him. I guess he was very nervous. I guess I can't blame him for that. But yeah, he might have had this lung disease. It's called whatever it's called. It's not lung cancer. It's that other thing that is in fact even worse, probably. So anyway, and he was like coughing a little bit in the later videos, but he didn't cough that much. And especially before the war, he didn't cough at all in his videos. So like thinking that it was some lung disease or whatever, that doesn't make sense or add up. I don't know, maybe you can get lung cancer very quickly and die from that, or that other disease which I forgot the name about. But yeah, I mean, But of course, sitting in a Ukrainian prison didn't help his health condition. But people say that he was overweight and stuff. Like, yeah, come on, he wasn't that overweight. I mean, he was out of shape for sure, but he wasn't like obese. And of course, he smoked a lot, but that doesn't kill you that quickly. Like, my grandmother smoked a lot, probably as much as Gonzalo Lira, and she lived to see 97, you know, so. And she was schizophrenic also. I mean, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, we won't probably know the truth about his death, his assumed death. We will never know the truth about him being tortured or extorted in prison. This is just his claims. We will never know if it's true or not. Because, of course, the people who do know, they will never tell anything to anybody. And, I mean, that's almost like secondary stuff. If he was extorted and quote-unquote tortured. I mean, when we saw him on the video with the motorcycle, the last one from August, that he didn't look that tortured to me. But anyway, depends on definitions. But anyway, if he indeed died, then that's something way more serious, of course. And I mean, sure, he might have been sitting in some cold prison cell and he might in fact have got this pneumonia of his lungs, double. And it might very well be that he didn't get the proper health care. And I mean, what the hell do you expect? He was in like Kharkiv. We can assume, we don't know this for a fact, that he was in Kharkiv. It's only his claims that he was like detained there and held there in this detention facility. So, I mean, the Russians have like bombed Ukraine to pieces for 1 year and 3/4 of a year, or even more, like 4/5. We're getting close to 2 years now. In 1 month and 9 days, it's gonna be 2 years of war. The Russians have bombed all the cities in Ukraine, especially Kharkiv for one. How can people expect him to get this treatment? They say, oh, he didn't get treatment for his illness. Yeah, what the fuck do you expect in a total war zone? Like, the Russians have bombed the hospitals. They've bombed the infrastructure. They've bombed the health clinics. It's a country totally engaged or engulfed in a full-blown fucking war. Old style 20th century war. It's like a mix of First World War, Second World War, and some later wars. All this drone stuff, that's new though. But how the hell can people expect him to get like some princess treatment in the healthcare? They probably bombed all the hospitals in Kharkiv if that's indeed where he was taken. I mean, why would he get premium treatment for his illnesses when they're probably busy 24/7 saving soldiers' lives over there, like performing surgeries on soldiers that are dying and getting maimed for life to save Ukraine and to defend Ukraine from the Russian war that they're waging on Ukraine. And Gonzalo Lira has been sitting for well over a year propagandizing, like spouting his propaganda for the Russians against Ukraine. And he was doing this while sitting in Ukraine. I mean, how is this even possible? It's like mind-boggling and mind-blowing that he wasn't deported at once. Because of course, after a few weeks, the SBU or some of the law enforcement agencies, they must have got wind of what he was up to. Like sitting in some apartment and like talking trash and talking shit about the country that he's sitting in that's being invaded by another country. And this is like a whole discussion of itself, why Gonzalo Lira did this. Like, didn't he understand that he's like in a country at war? A full-blown hot war, and he's sitting there propagandizing for the enemy. I mean, I can't believe this. I can't understand it. Can you? Like, how can you expect to get away with that or be allowed to do that? I mean, if Mexico was fighting a war for survival against the United States that were like invading Mexico and bombing Mexico 24/7, do you think that in Mexico you could sit and like take the sides of the Americans, like spouting anti-Mexican garbage? Or if Canada invaded the United States, like, do you think you could sit in the United States and like cheer on the Canadians and talking trash and talking shit about the Americans? Like, no, forget about that. In wars, there is martial law. Of course, you're not allowed to speak propaganda for the enemy that's invading the country you're sitting in. I mean, Gonzalo Lira, why didn't he do this, what he did, outside Ukraine? Like, this is a whole discussion of its own, but he could have kept talking his trash in another country, like in the godforsaken, oh so hated West that he was speaking trash about. I mean, he could have sat in London, in Netherlands, in a cozy, warm apartment, talking trash about Ukraine and praising Russia's war effort, which was exactly what he did. But no, he wanted to stay in Ukraine and even in the east, in Kharkiv, which is very close to the Russian border. I mean, yeah, everybody has to realize that this is insane. And then we're coming to like, I actually do believe that Gonzalo Lira was not sane. He was like if we just generalize, like he was probably bipolar, suicidal, he had a death wish. He was probably very unbalanced in his character, because you could see all these videos online where he like had like online bitch fights with YouTubers and like spewing hate over them. And even these no-name YouTubers, like total nobodies with a few hundred or a few thousand subs, much like myself, he was like making up drama with them. And he was like walking around, in one video he was like walking around in New York and talking aggressively and vehemently about some YouTuber, I think is this Kraut and Tier, what the hell it's called. And I mean, those channels probably didn't even know who he was. So this is like no, it's not creepy. It's like what the fuck? It was like he was like leeching or piggybacking on other YouTubers' fame. And he also had some beef with Carl Benjamin. Like, what was the name of his YouTube channel? Some Roman tacky name, like Carl Benjamin. Yeah, he was huge. He had like a couple of hundreds of thousands of subs, this Carl Benjamin. And Coach Red Pill, back then he had very few. But all this took place before whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think CRP Gonzalo Lira, he was wacko. I do think he was wacko, and he said so himself. He like made it clear in his videos that he's a wacko guy, really wacko. So, but he was funny. He was charismatic and funny. I mean, I'm not here to talk trash about Gonzalo Lira. I don't like talking down on the dead, on the deceased. We shouldn't like unnecessarily talk down on people who are not among the living. But we can talk about a few aspects of this. He was very entertaining. He was at times very funny. He was captivating. He was charismatic. So I do understand that he got a huge following, and he was like flying under the radar because he got way more subs and following than many other YouTubers that probably worked much harder for it than Gonzalo, and that most importantly didn't talk all the trash that Gonzalo did. So, getting thirsty. So yeah, I mean, what do you expect? He should have left Ukraine, of course. That's what he should have done, and then continue talking his trash. So, but he wasn't murdered, and he was no journalist. We need to agree on that. He might have been a YouTuber, he might have been a pundit, he might have been a guy with a lot of opinions, and he was a guy who knew a lot about Ukraine, of course, because he'd been living there for a long time. That's not. We're not questioning that. And people say that he's an American. Like, why doesn't the U.S. set him free? Why doesn't the U.S. Government make a phone call and then he will be also free? Like, no, forget about that. Why should he be above the law? Gonzalo Lira had been consistently breaking Ukraine wartime laws. They're also called martial laws. It's international, that word, martial law. It's laws that apply in the wartime, and there's a big fucking war going on in Ukraine. And dumbass Gonzalo Lira needed to sit like in the center of it. Probably because of his ego. This other YouTuber, entrepreneurs in cars, Rich Cooper, he said that he weighed in on this, and he said that like Gonzalo Lira, he wanted to become a martyr. He said that's what he thought, or his feeling or opinion, like that he wanted to become some kind of martyr. And then the question is, a martyr for what? Maybe Gonzalo Lira knew that he was terminally ill or like dying. Maybe he knew that he had some very serious issue like cancer, lung cancer or whatever. And maybe that in turn led to his double pneumonia or whatever. And what kind of cancer treatment can you expect when you're sitting in a prison in East Ukraine when there's a hot war going on, bombs are flying, missiles are landing next to you, and you're a propagandist for the enemy? I mean, what kind of healthcare can you expect to get? So, but yeah, maybe he didn't get healthcare, to round that off. Maybe he didn't get it, but he should have thought about that before doing what he did. Because he was like sitting there breaking their laws month after month after month in a very serious situation. The bad thing is that they didn't deport him. Or the good thing, depending on how you see things. But the Ukraine should have deported him early on, very early on. But maybe they weren't even legally allowed to deport him because he was maybe married to this woman. He had those kids that were maybe naturalized Ukrainian citizens. Like because they were probably born there. Again, we don't know for a fact anything about his wife, his kids. We don't know if his ex-wife or whoever it is in fact even Ukrainian. Maybe she's Russian, maybe she's Moldovan, maybe she's something else. All this is just hearsay. Like, we have to take their word for it. And when I say their word, I mean Gonzalo Lira and all the guys that are on his side. So let's assume his ex-wife was Ukrainian. Maybe the Ukrainian government or whoever, maybe they didn't even have the legal right to expel him, like deport him at that point in time. Because maybe he owned that apartment on his name or something, and maybe they were just not legally allowed to deport him. But he should have left on his own. But probably in the beginning he thought that the war would be quick, like it was in Crimea, like a week, and then everything would be over and he would be sitting on the Russian side now. Like now his side would be on the Russian side, like Kharkiv. Maybe he thought they would take all Ukraine because that's what he claimed He said like, oh, the Russians are winning extraordinarily fast. He said sometime in March, I think it was. But of course they didn't win extraordinarily fast. But anyway, uh, so he wasn't murdered. That's what I want to talk about. He maybe was bereft. Is that the English word? Like maybe he didn't get the proper health care, but that's not murder. Because in the end he put himself in that situation. Everybody need to agree on that. He was never forced to stay in Ukraine, except after he'd been detained, I think. I think his first detainment was in May 2023, like well over a year after the war started. He was arrested or whatever, questioned, also in 2022, but we don't know any facts about that. There are no documents out there that shows what was going on that time. That time when he disappeared for a week, I think it was, and the internet went crazy and said that he had been abducted and murdered in Ukraine, which he hadn't. And anyway, so maybe after that second detainment in May 2023, maybe then he wasn't allowed to leave the country, because then he was like under investigation for crimes, for real. So so yeah, he should have left, but he didn't. So he basically put himself in his situation. I don't think there is much to debate or discuss about that. And what kind of treatment can you expect in a corrupt Eastern European country which doesn't warrant them being invaded by an even worse bandit state, namely Russia? What kind of treatment can you expect when you're sitting there propagandizing for the enemy, talking down on the country that you're sitting in for over a year? I mean, for your audience of hundreds of thousands of people. Like, and don't give me that crap that he said that, oh, I love Ukraine, I want this to be over, blah, blah, blah. No, he wanted those things to happen. Maybe before the war and everything, of course, maybe he didn't want a war. I don't think he did. But when it happened, he definitely took the side of the Russians. Otherwise, he would have liked, he wouldn't have, he would have talked about things from another angle, let's say. So, yeah, he was no journalist and he wasn't murdered. He died, we can assume, from his illness that he very well might have had long before he was detained in that prison. Whenever it was. He was making that video 1st of August 2023. So that means that he was detained in May and he was sitting for a good, was it 6 weeks or whatever? And then they left him on bail. And then he was bragging, oh, I have access to big money. I have easy access to big funds. Like, why is he talking about that on camera? And most importantly, if he was so wealthy as he claimed, or whatever, something to that understanding, why was he sitting in a poor, crappy town and shithole of a country, basically? Excuse me, all Ukrainians, but I mean, yeah, in a wartime, in a war zone. Why was he sitting there if he had access to all this money and blah, 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 you know? I didn't mean to call Ukraine a shithole. I apologize for that. But I can imagine that, like, the level of comfort and standard in Kharkiv, like East Ukraine, near Russia, during a war, I can imagine that it's not so luxurious, let's say. So I think he was kind of crazy, and I think he got like more and more warped in his head. He became trapped in this world of his own propaganda and Russian propaganda and whatever. And he fucked up mentally. I don't know how to describe it in English properly because I'm not an English or American native speaker. I don't have all the proper words. But yeah, I think he lost his wits, his nuts, step by step, like slowly during this whole process. Before the war, he made like videos like, oh, leave the West now while you still can. Move to Africa. He in fact made a video called Move to Africa. No way, Jose. I don't even think I'm gonna visit Africa in my life. I mean, what? I don't want to see Africa actually. But anyway, that's not relevant. I would like to see Egypt and Morocco though. I might go to Africa anyway. So, um, um, yeah, I think he lost it. I think he got more and more. I don't want to say crazy, but like he lost his wits sitting in that country, especially after the war, let's say. So yeah, and he made videos like leave Europe, leave the West while you still can, and move. I think he made a video long before the war called "Move to Ukraine." I think there was a video like that. But like, why? Why should people move to Ukraine? Why should people move to Africa? I mean, most people don't want to do that. Most people don't want to move to shitty East European countries. Excuse my language, but they are pretty shitty in many places, actually, East European countries. And Africa, let's not even talk about that. I mean, no, I'm not moving to Africa or East Europe for that matter. No, it's not gonna happen. Like, sorry, Gonzalo. Yeah, it's not a good idea. And look at what happened to him. Like, come on, get a grip. There is even a very radical YouTuber. I don't remember his channel, but he's like he could be like the son of Coach Red Pill. He's an American guy sitting in the like Arizona or something. He's full of misogynistic hate, way worse than Gonzalo Lira. And even he made a video about Gonzalo Lira where he talked a little bit about how dumb it was that Gonzalo Lira and other manosphere guys like promote and like says that people should go and live in the East Europe or in other poor places of the world because that's fucking dumb. Because even he who like at face value and when you check him he's like very misogynistic, he hates liberals, he's very pro-Trump and whatever and whatever and wherever, but even he says in that video that no, don't move to those shitholes, stay in the West, stay in America, stay in the UK, stay in the West Europe, because those are the fun places to be, even though they are full of like woke, full of these trans garbage propaganda and pride propaganda and all the craziness going on here in the Western countries. Because as a matter of fact, that's more fun. Like, and even he, who's a very hateful guy, even though he has some good moments also, even he realizes that and states it's obviously. Like, I mean, if Moscow, if Russia and like Belarus, like White Russia, and China and Iran and other autocratic places, autocrat, I don't know. If they are so fucking great, then why don't we see a mass exodus to those places? Like, move wholesale to Russia, all you guys that think that's a nice place, or that Putin is a nice guy, or that Russia is like the salt of the earth place, or China, or any other communist fascist place, like Russia, or even Saudi Arabia for that matter. If you think those places are like they have high virtue, they're conservative, they have traditional values, fuck off. They don't. You can find traditional values on every country on earth, in every country on earth, also in the Western countries. Like what you have in Russia, Belarus, Iran, China, and in many of those shithole countries, it's authoritarianism. You have dictators. You have no freedom of speech. So please, by all means, all you guys who think they're great, move over there wholesale, please. Just go, just leave. Take the train, bus, plane, I don't care. Just go there. And leave the West for me and everybody else that thinks that it's more fun in the West. Because undoubtedly it is more fun in the West. And we should all agree on that. So no, the United States could not and should not make quote unquote a phone call and free Gonzalo Lira from his captivity in Ukraine because he committed crimes against Ukrainian wartime law and probably also normal laws. So why should he be above the law? Why should he be deported and like get a free ticket to ride out of that country? Like free lease to go. Why should he be above the law? If you're in a country and you break the laws, especially in a quite precarious situation like a hot fucking war going on, a war that looks something like a mix of the Second World War and the First World War, then you don't sit there and break their wartime laws, propagandizing for the enemy. So why should the United States, like, quote unquote, raise the phone and make a phone call to Zelensky and free him? No. He must face the law in that country. I mean, there are many political prisoners, and Gonzalo Lira is not a political prisoner. He's a prisoner for something that he actually did in Ukraine. He broke laws openly. Wartime laws. Martial laws. And I mean, Russia is full of political prisoners. Iran is full of political prisoners. Ethiopia, I think it's Ethiopia, or is Eritrea, or whatever the shithole country is called. That there is a Swedish man there, like a Swedish Eritrean or whatever. He's been there for like 15 years now, I think. Why doesn't the internet blow up in protests of these people? Like, yeah. Many countries all around the world are full of prisoners. Especially those shithole countries that I mentioned. They're full of political prisoners, and Gonzalo was not a political prisoner. So no. He should face the law in that country where he committed that crime. Of course, he should not get extra high punishment or extra severe, and of course he should not be tortured or be bereft of health care. Of course not. But what did he expect in that country, considering the situation in Ukraine? Like, he should have thought about this before he did what he did. So no. No free tickets for him, no. Too bad, but he put himself in that situation. And it didn't end well, but yeah. Maybe he knew that he was dying, and maybe he just didn't care anymore, because he knew that he might have maybe a year left or half a year or whatever. So what did it matter in the end? Maybe it was that way. So I'm probably gonna make more videos about Gonzalo Lira, but let this one be a first one. It's actually my third one about him. And yeah. What's to say about him? He was a very charismatic man that talked a lot of hideous trash in a charismatic way, which made him like a saint or a sanctified person in many people's eyes on the internet. But just because somebody's charismatic doesn't mean that they are telling the truth, or that they're telling something good or useful or proper or moral or virtuous. No. He talked a lot of bad trash in a very charismatic way, and that's very dangerous. Donald Trump is doing the same. So, you know what they say in the Bible, like, the devil can disguise himself as a beautiful person or a beautiful woman or whatever. So, watch out for that. Watch out for that. So, yeah, my 2 cents on Gonzalo Lira. I'm gonna wrap this up now. I think my camera is gonna cut at 45 minutes and I have 15 seconds left. So, no, Gonzalo Lira was not a journalist and he was not murdered. He put himself in a bad situation, and that had severe consequences. Thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe to my channel. Okay, bye now.